Chapter 1. Rose shoved the last load of her laundry into the dryer and climbed onto the counter of the small apartment laundromat. She picked up her novel and opened to the page she'd left off on. Another Friday night, another 3 loads of laundry. Rose always did her laundry on Friday nights. She didn't have to work the next day, and no one else was ever there to fight her for the washers and dryers. It was a great situation for her. She was halfway through her chapter when she heard the door open. She hadn't seen anyone in there for the past 3 weeks, so she immediately looked up to see who else could have such a sad lack of a social life that they would be doing laundry on a Friday night. Her eyes opened wide as she stared at the gorgeous man who'd just walked in. He must have been at least 6'3" with broad shoulders. Rose grinned to herself as she watched him over the top of her book. He had black hair, and it looked like brown eyes, but it was hard to tell from here. He was trim and muscular. Rose tried not to drool. He was carrying 2 huge black trash bags that were apparently full of laundry. He was either married with 6 kids and doing the laundry for the whole family, or he had waited way too long to do his laundry. Rose lifted her eyes again to check out his left hand, but there was no ring on his finger. He must have not done laundry in forever. He opened the garbage bags and started to dump all of the laundry into one washer, not paying any attention to what he was mixing together. Rose cringed and put her book down. "You can't wash all that without sorting it," she told him. "Let me help you." He shrugged. "I always do. It takes longer if I sort it." "Are you late for something?" Most people who do laundry on a Friday night are sadly lacking in the social life department, she said. "So unless you have a hot date that starts sometime after midnight, then you may as well do it right." "No, I'm not in a hurry. I just have to work in the morning, and don't want to be at this all night," he said. He shrugged. If she wanted to help him sort his laundry, he was game. There were worse ways to spend an evening than with a pretty girl in a laundromat. Of course, there were much better ways to spend an evening as well. "It'll only take an extra 5 minutes if we work together. Put some money into 5 washing machines and I'll start sorting," she said. She immediately started pulling the clothes he'd packed into the first washer out and spreading them across the first 4 washers. She put jeans in the first one, colors in the second, whites in the third and towels in the fourth. If he was anything like her, they'd put more colors in the 5th, but whatever it was that needed to go in there, she knew they'd need at least 5 washers. They ended up needing 8. Once they had everything sorted, and the machines going, she settled back down onto the counter with her book. He walked over and hoisted himself up next to her, taking her book from her hands. "Hey, this is sci-fi. I figured you for a romance reader." She shrugged. "I do read romance. It's my secret pleasure. I only read sci-fi in public." He laughed. "I see. I think I do at least." He looked down at her, liking the way she looked. She was wearing a pair of faded warm-ups and a t-shirt, which was a smart choice for laundry on a March night in North Texas. Her long blonde hair was pulled back into a ponytail. Her eyes looked green, but it was hard to tell from this angle. "Do you always do your laundry on Friday nights?" "Of course, I do," she grinned. "I have no life." "Okie dokie. I can understand that. I don't really have a life either, but I never do my laundry until it threatens to swallow my apartment whole." "I hate laundry," he said. "I do too. That's why I do it every Friday night like clockwork. It never piles up and I never have to do 8 loads in one night. You do realize we just started 8 loads of laundry for you, right?" "Don't remind me. I don't even want to think about it," he told her. "Thanks for the help, by the way. I'm sure I'll be thrilled when my socks stay white and don't turn pink from my red t-shirts." "No problem. I had nothing better to do while I sit here and wait for my clothes to dry," she said. "I'm Alex," he said, holding his hand out to her to shake. She took his hand in hers. "I'm Rose. Please don't quote Romeo and Juliet to me." He looked puzzled. "Why would I quote Romeo and Juliet?" "Oh. I get it. That hole arose by any other name or something like that. Yes, and every literate male I meet quotes that to me. You seem literate, but don't do it. It gets old fast. He laughed. I can understand that. No one ever quotes Shakespeare to me. Does that mean that there's something wrong with me? He had his head tilted to the side as if he was genuinely worried about the fact. Nope. It just means your parents didn't name you after a flower. Rose sighed heavily. She'd always hated her name. She'd thought about going by her middle name, but that was Lily, which was just as bad. Her mother had a gardening obsession. I have to say, I'm really glad they didn't. She grinned. I don't know. It could have been a good conversation starter. Do you mind if I call you Tulip? He loved the impish grin on her face as if she was daring him to agree to her suggestion. How about I just come up with a conversation starter instead? He sat thinking for a moment. Okay, I got it. Are you ready? His brown eyes twinkled down at her as he asked. She tried to suppress a giggle. He was crazy, but in a fun way. Wait, let me brace myself. She grabbed onto the counter tightly. Okay, I'm ready. Rose couldn't believe a total stranger could make laundry night fun. Hi, my name is Alex, and I'm making a bid for world domination. Would you be my follower? He asked. Rose threw back her head and laughed. That's a good one. I don't think anyone would ever talk to you twice, but it's a good conversation starter. It sounded like something she might say herself. Alex looked at the pretty little girl sitting next to him on the counter, trying to figure out why she had no social life. She was sweet, had a sense of humor, and was cute as a button. He loved the way she laughed. So many women seemed afraid to laugh heartily. Why was she in a laundromat on a Friday night? He grinned down at her. How about this one? What's a pretty girl like you doing in a place like this on a Friday night? I already told you that, Alex. Try to pay attention. I hate laundry, so try to finish it first thing on the weekend, and I have no life. He shook his head slowly. That's not going to cut it. There's got to be a reason you have no life. You're fun, pretty, and outgoing. Why do you have no life? And did you just tell me to try to pay attention? She was not like others girls, that was for sure. She shrugged. I don't put out. I'm very vocal about it too. I think that sex should only take place within the confines of marriage. Call me old-fashioned. Call me boring and ridiculous. I don't care. He nodded slowly. That would explain it. Are you a religious nut, or just a girl with standards? She smiled at him. I'm a girl with standards. I think that if a guy loves me enough to do me, he needs to love me enough to buy me a ring and walk down the aisle. If not, there are lots of girls who put out in every bar in town. He can go find one of them. He nodded again. I can respect that. So you're holding out for a ring, because there's no reason to buy the cow if you can get the milk for free? There's no point in locking the barn door after the horse is out, she replied seriously. Guys rent used furniture, but they only buy new, he responded. She laughed. I haven't heard that one before. I love it. She had always loved idioms, and was pleased to add another to her repertoire. One of the dryers buzzed and she jumped down off the counter. You can't be finished, he complained. I need you to stay and talk to me. He wasn't ready to let her go yet. He had to get to know her better. Maybe he could talk her into giving him her number before she left. He didn't care if she didn't put out. She was fun to be around. I'm probably not. They usually take 2 cycles to finish. She glanced at him. You should bring a book so you don't get bored. Why? I'd rather talk to you, he responded. So you're going to start joining me for Friday night laundry, she asked with a grin. She didn't expect him to do it, but it would be great if she had a laundry buddy. Of course, the real reason she wanted him to do laundry with her was so she could get to know him better. He shuddered. Not if I can avoid it, he said. Although, it's a whole lot more fun with you here. He winked at her. Thanks. I think. She restarted her 3 dryers again, and walked back over to him and her book. She put her bookmark in the book and closed it. There was no point in even trying to read when she was entertained far better by the man sitting next to her. "So I get you for a little bit longer?" he asked. She just laughed at that. "I guess so. Probably another 30 minutes, and then I'll fold my laundry and head on back to my lonely apartment. I need to get a goldfish. A goldfish would keep me company." "Dogs are better," he responded quickly. "I'm away 14 hours a day half the time. That wouldn't be fair to a dog." "No, it'll have to be a goldfish." She definitely would have preferred a dog, though. "Too bad you don't put out," he said jokingly. "I'm sure you'd never be lonely again." "I'm sure," she laughed. "Do you clean your bathrooms on Saturday nights?" he asked. "Nah, I usually get that done on Saturday mornings. Every Saturday night, I make a date with my TV, and catch up on watching everything that I DVR'd the week before." "You really are a wild woman," he said. "I know. I can barely stand the crazy life I lead. Do you know that last week, when I mopped my kitchen, I turned the music up loud, and actually danced with the mop? It was just scandalous." She said it with an air of secrecy, like she was almost afraid to admit she'd done something like that. "That sounds scandalous," he said with a shocked look on his face. "I'm so glad no one was there to see that. You could have been arrested for indecent behavior." "I know. I'm really ashamed of myself," she said with her head down. "How about doing something more scandalous tomorrow night, and going out to dinner with me?" He hadn't meant to ask so abruptly, but he had to make sure he'd see her again soon. She laughed. "Because you're looking for a girl who isn't going to put out, I'm sure. All men are." She didn't believe that he was actually asking her out. Most men were scared off as soon as she said she didn't put out before marriage. "What I'm looking for is a girl with a sense of humor, who hasn't slept with every man she's met, who wants to have some fun with me," he said seriously. "How about it?" He tried to keep the desperation from his voice as he asked. He really did want to go out with her. She was special. She shrugged. "Okay. I can do that." She was more than willing to spend time with this great guy. She just hoped he realized she was serious about not having sex before marriage. They got up, and she helped him transfer his laundry into dryers. "Great. I'll pick you up at 6. "Okay," she said. He pulled out his cell phone and input the number she gave him. "Just in case I'm going to be late, I'll give you a call." They got back onto the counter where they'd been sitting. "You said you had to work in the morning," she said. "What do you do? Aren't you supposed to ask me that before you agree to go out with me?" "I mean, what if I'm a trash collector?" he asked. "I don't really care what you do. I'll go out with you anyway. I wouldn't date someone on the merit of his occupation. I'm just curious. I'm an architect, but I own my own construction firm, and with all the rain we've had, we're behind on a project. I need to go check it out tomorrow, and see how everything is going. The client wants a projected date when we'll be finished." "That sounds like it could be exciting," she told him. "What kind of project is it?" "Some crazy rich guy wanted me to custom design a home for him. He's going to be moving up to Westlake," he said, naming a high-dollar community north of Fort Worth. "This place has it all. Indoor pool and tennis court, family kitchen and catering kitchen had to be separate. It's crazy what all he wanted, but he was willing to pay well, so we did it. I'm hoping to have the whole project done by the end of next month," he told her. "Wow. I hope he has a family to live in it with him," she said. "He's a newlywed, and they're hoping to have a big family. They both come from money, and he makes good money in his daddy's company, so they're getting exactly what they want," he said. "Some people have more money than brains, and this couple is a good example of that." "It sounds like it," she responded. "I joke about wanting a place like that, but I couldn't afford the maid that I'd want to go with it. I can't imagine cleaning that kind of space. People don't really need that kind of space, unless they have 15 or 16 kids." He stretched, starting to find sitting on the counter uncomfortable. "What do you do?" She sighed heavily. "I work in a cube talking on the phone all day," she replied. "I talk to rich people about their money." She hated her job. She knew it came out in her voice, but she just couldn't stop it. "That sounds horrible," he said without thinking. She wrinkled her nose. "It really is. I want to own a little used bookstore and sit behind the desk and talk to people about good books all day long. I hate what I do." She didn't usually talk to people about her dream of owning a bookstore, but she found herself wanting to tell him every detail of her life. "Do you work for a bank?" "Even worse," she said. "I work for a brokerage firm. It pays well, and I'm good at it, but I hate it. I'm saving, though, and someday soon, I'll have the money to start my little bookstore." "Good for you. I hope you have it soon. I can't imagine you with one of those little antenna things on your head talking on the phone all day," he said. "I can see you in a bookstore, though. You bring people back with your pleasant chatter." "That's exactly what it feels like too. It makes my ear itch," she sighed. "I'm always working as many hours as I can get so that I can save up enough for the bookstore. I've been out of college for 2 years now, and I figure I have about half of what I'll need." "You could give up on your bookstore and become my campaign manager instead," he told her. Campaign manager? Was he running for office? What was she missing? "I'm taking over the world." "Did you already forget?" he asked. All of the dryers started buzzing, and they got down. He restarted his, and she took her clothes out and folded them neatly, putting them on hangers, and resting them in the laundry baskets she'd brought with her. He watched her work, and finally said, "I need to get some of those things." "What things?" she asked. He pointed at the basket. "Those things. Then my dirty laundry would stay contained and not threaten my apartment the way it usually does." He joked about it, but he really wasn't exaggerating. His apartment was downright scary to walk into. She looked up at him. "I like you. You scare me, but I like you." She picked up the first basket and started toward the door to the laundry room. "Watch my other basket for me. I wouldn't want the stampeding herds of people who come here to do laundry on Friday nights to steal my clothes." He picked up her other basket. "I'll just carry it for you. That way I'll know where you live, and won't have to hunt up your apartment tomorrow night." He wanted to see her space as well. He expected it to be neat as a pin, but wanted to know. He wanted to know everything about her. "Okay," she agreed. She wasn't going to argue with that. She hated walking through the parking lot alone after dark anyway. He followed her across the wide parking lot and down a level to her apartment. She unlocked the door, and he followed her in, putting the basket on her kitchen table for her. "Is it always this neat?" he asked. He'd expected it, but he was shocked by just how neat it was. There wasn't a single dirty dish in the sink. "Well, I'm the only one who lives here. I'm capable of picking up after myself, so it just doesn't get dirty," she said. "Remind me to never show you my apartment," he told her. "I think you'd be pretty disgusted." "Typical male?" she asked. He struck her as someone who could be very organized and take care of things well, but he had to care first. She doubted he cared about how his apartment looked. "Yeah, I'm afraid so. My sister used to try to hire cleaning girls for me, but they'd take one step inside the door and run away screaming. It was sad." "She stopped trying," he said. She rolled her eyes at him. "Go back and babysit your laundry," she said. "I'll see you tomorrow night." He was halfway to the door when she stopped him. "What should I wear?" "Jeans okay?" "Yeah, jeans are fine. We'll go somewhere casual." "Sounds good," she said as she shut the door behind him. Chapter 2. Rose got up early to get done with her chores the following morning. She didn't really have anything that she wanted to wear on a date. Since she'd graduated from college 2 years before, she hadn't been willing to spend any more money than absolutely necessary. Work clothes were a necessity. Workout clothes were a necessity. Workout clothes could be worn for laundry and errands. Why did she need nice jeans? Tonight, she needed a nice pair of jeans. She needed a pretty blouse. She may even need some cowboy boots. She'd moved to North Texas when she was 16, and had gone to college in Arlington, where she still lived. Her parents had long since moved back to Illinois where she'd grown up, but she'd stayed for college, and had found a job in nearby Fort Worth when she'd graduated. Every extra dime had gone straight into savings. Maybe it was time she lightened up and lived a little. She could spend a little bit of that savings. Rose spent the afternoon wandering around the mall, looking for just the right clothes. She found a pair of jeans that fit her body snugly, but not so tightly that she couldn't breathe easily. She hated jeans that were that tight, and couldn't understand why any woman would wear them that way. They fit so well that she bought 2 pairs. You never knew when you'd need jeans. She found a buy 2 get 1 free sale on blouses at a favorite store of hers. She'd bought some blouses from there while she was in college, but they were long since in ruins. She wasn't into shopping, and tended to wear her clothes until they were stained or falling apart. She bought 3 blouses and headed out. She went to a small western store and found a pair of pink cowboy boots. She'd never been big into cowboy boots, but she did love pink ones. She debated buying a pair on and off during her 8 years in Texas. She arrived home around 4:30 and started to get ready for her date. She had dated very little over the years, which was mainly due to her outspokenness. She had given every man who had looked at her twice her opinions about sex before marriage, and most had either been looking only for sex, or had just not been willing to date someone who was as outspoken as she was. Either way, she was happy to get them out of the way. She wasn't in any kind of hurry to get married. If the right guy proposed, then sure. Otherwise, she was young and had a goal. She was ready at 5:45 and grabbed her Nook, which contained the romance novel that she was currently engrossed in. She curled up on the couch and read until she heard a knock. She shut off her Nook and set it on the coffee table. She quickly went to the door and opened it. She'd chosen to wear jeans, a soft pink button-up blouse, and her new cowboy boots. Alex stood there in a pair of jeans, a western shirt, and a pair of cowboy boots. He grinned at her. "You look great." His made no effort to hide the way his eyes slid over her from head to toe. Rose almost felt as if his hand had stroked up her body. She was amazed at just how sexually aware she was of this man. She'd never met anyone who made her feel this way. "Thanks. You look pretty good yourself," she told him. He handed her a bouquet of carnations, and she buried her nose in them, and then went to the kitchen to put them in water. "I love them." "Thank you. Come on in while I find something to put these in." She didn't have a vase, so she used a water glass. He followed her to the kitchen and watched her, leaning lazily against the counter. "I thought we'd go out to a steak place I know. They have dancing and a good country band most nights," he said. "It's not a bar, but they do serve alcohol. I hope that's all right." "Sounds great. I love to dance," she said. "I'm not much of a drinker, but I don't have a problem if you want a drink or 2. "I don't drink," he said. He didn't elaborate, but she had a feeling there was a story in there somewhere. "Let me get my jacket, and I'll be ready to go," she told him. She grabbed her jacket off the chair where she'd laid it earlier, and slipped it on. He held the door for her and even took her key to lock it. "I do know how to lock my own door, you know," she said. She didn't mind that he was doing it for her, but she felt she needed to make at least a token protest. "I know. My mama always taught me that a gentleman locked and unlocked doors for his date. So that's what I do," he explained. "That works. Tell me about your mama," she said. She'd always thought that you could tell a lot about a man by how he felt about his mother. He led her to a dark blue pickup truck and opened the passenger door for her. "Well, let's see." He walked around the truck and got in beside her. She was a great mom. She was a teacher when she and Dad were first married, but decided to stay home to raise us. She always had a snack ready when we got home from school. Now that Dad is retired, they're traveling around North America in an RV. Sounds like fun to me. Did you grow up here in Arlington? She asked. Yep. I lived in the same house from the day I was born until I graduated from college. Wow. That must have been great. We moved around quite a bit because my dad was a manager for a retail chain. They'd move us to new areas to open new stores, and then move us again once it was up and running, she said. My parents have moved back to Illinois, and Dad said he's not moving again. So that Yankee accent I hear is Illinois? I was wondering. Rose sighed. After 8 years, you can still hear the accent? When she first moved to Texas, she didn't think that the Midwestern states had accents. Now when she went back to visit, she would almost cringe at the strong nasal voices. Once a Yankee, always a Yankee, he teased. Did you have to show them your green card when you started your job? You're one of those, are you? She asked, referring to native Texans who tended to think that everyone from any other state was a foreigner. Yes, ma'am, I'm proud of it too, he grinned. She laughed. Looking out the window, she realized they were headed north on Highway 360 and had left Arlington behind. Where are we going? I figured you'd take me somewhere in Arlington. Now. I found this great little place up in Grapevine. I figured I'd take you there. I get more time in your company that way, he said. Okay, she answered. You said your mom stayed home with us. How many brothers and sisters do you have? It's just me and my kid sister, Sarah. She's married and has a little boy. They live here in Arlington. How about you? Any brothers or sisters? I'm an only. My mom always wanted more, but it just didn't happen. She knew her mother had been disappointed in only having one child, and she'd really been torn up when Rose had decided to stay in Texas when they moved back home. They remained close, though. So were you a typical spoiled only? He asked. I don't think so. I mean, my parents made sure I knew that I was the center of their world, but I didn't get everything I wanted whenever I wanted it. They expected me to work hard and get good grades. I had to get summer jobs in high school, and they expected me to get a scholarship to pay as much of my way through college as I could. Sounds like they raised you right, he said with a grin. That's the kind of parent I plan to be someday. I'm so glad you approve, she said sarcastically. She did note that he wanted children. That was definitely a point in his favor. He laughed and said, You should be. I'm the most important man in this truck. You sure are. She grinned. How did work go today? It was good. I think we should be done within the next couple of weeks, and that thrilled the client. I'm ready to move on to other projects, he said. What do you have in the works? She asked. Just some more houses. I think that's going to be my niche. Custom homes. I have no desire to design the cookie-cutter homes that you find in every neighborhood. How long have you had your own business? She asked. My dad was an architect. When I graduated, I worked with him for a couple of years, and then he retired, and I took it over. It's been mine for about 4 years now. Some of the guys who have been there forever still think of me as the boss's kid. Does that make it tough? She asked. She couldn't imagine having to constantly live in her father's shadow. He shrugged. I guess it did at first, but now it's no big deal. They always do what I say, and that's what matters when you get right down to it. He pulled the truck into the parking lot of a small restaurant. He ran around the truck to open her door for her, taking her hand and helping her down. Those manners your mama taught you seem to have stuck, she said. They better have. She'd take after me with a wooden spoon if they hadn't, he said with a grin. Are you afraid of your mama? She asked with a laugh. Every smart Southern man is afraid of his mama. You never outgrow having to listen to her. Never, he said seriously. He opened the door for her, and they went into the restaurant. He'd made reservations, and they were led to a corner booth. He waited until she slid into one side, and then he slid into the other. I'm glad you're not one of those who thinks we need to sit on one side together. That always looks weird to me, she said. I think so too, he told her quietly. Besides, I want to be able to watch your pretty face as we talk. She looked down at her menu, a little flustered by the compliment. What's good here? The steak is great. I haven't bothered to try anything else, because it's a steak place, and it's Texas. If you get the chicken, you're liable to be run out of town, he told her. I think I'll have a steak, she said with a laugh. I think that's a fabulous choice, he told her with a wink. The waiter was there then asking for their drink orders. I'll just have water, she told him. No lemon, please. Alex asked for a sweet tea, and as the waiter walked away he asked, what is it with always putting lemon in people's water anyway? I mean, if you want lemonade, you order lemonade. Water should be just that. Water. No kidding. That's a major pet peeve of mine. I hate lemon in my water. I don't understand why people want it, or why restaurants expect everyone to like it that way, she sighed. I like water. Plain boring old water. He reached out and took her hand in his. He slowly rubbed his thumb over her palm. I assume hand-holding before marriage is okay? I can make an exception, just this once, she returned with a smile. She felt a tingle shoot through her. She knew most girls thought hand-holding was boring, but she'd done so little of it that it was actually exciting for her. The waiter came back with their drinks, and they ordered their meals. As soon as the waiter walked off, he stood and pulled her to her feet. Dance with me, Rose. She followed him onto the dance floor, going into his arms for a slow country song. They danced together in silence. He had one hand holding hers, and the other was at her waist. He rested his cheek against the top of her head as they slowly swayed to the music, not talking, just enjoying being close. He was a good dancer, and it was easy to follow his lead. She enjoyed being held by him. He held her just right. He wasn't trying to hold her so close that it felt like he was trying to force her to have vertical sex with him, but he wasn't holding her at arm's length either. After the song ended, they returned to the table. The waiter had brought their salads, and they talked softly while eating. Rose had seldom been with a man that she felt this comfortable around. There was a definite attraction, but he was so laid back that it was easy to just be in his presence and talk about anything and everything. She learned that he was 30 to her 24. He enjoyed putting on work clothes and helping out with the construction side of things on the job at times. He went to his sister's house every Sunday evening for dinner. He liked his brother-in-law and enjoyed spending time with his nephew. After they'd finished their meal, they shared a piece of cheesecake with raspberry sauce. She enjoyed the intimacy of sharing a dessert with him. He fed her the last bite, because his southern manners wouldn't allow him to eat the last one himself. They danced to a couple more songs, before they headed back out to his truck to make the 20-minute drive back to the north part of Arlington. What did you think of my favorite restaurant? He asked once they were back on the highway headed south. I loved it. The atmosphere was perfect. We were able to talk without yelling, but it was still a fun place. I don't think you could have picked a better place, she told him. What did you think of your steak? It was fabulous. It was perfectly tender, and they actually cooked it right. I give it 2 thumbs up. He grinned. I'm glad you liked it. We'll have to go back there sometime. Assuming that you agree to go out with me again, he said. You haven't done anything that would make me say no yet, she replied. I like that yet, like you're waiting for me to do something really stupid, he said. I thought you would, she laughed. So far, no man has disappointed that yet. What big plans do you have for tomorrow? He asked. Oh, probably finishing the novel I'm reading. I might go nuts and get my grocery shopping done for the week, she said. How would you feel about taking a nice long walk up at River Legacy Park? He asked. That sounds like fun. I could go for that, she said, secretly pleased that he wanted to see her again so soon. When he pulled up in front of her apartment, he got out and opened her door, holding his hand out for her key. She set the key in his hand, and he unlocked her door for her. Do you want to come in for a drink? She asked. I'd love to, he responded, following her into the apartment. She got him some tea from her fridge and grabbed herself a glass of water. She sat next to him on the couch, and they talked a while. He told her some funny stories about some of the guys at work, and she talked about some of the crazy investors that she talked to on a daily basis. Many of them treated her as if she needed to worship at their feet because of the money they had with her company. She was glad the investors couldn't see her face as they spoke. After about 30 minutes, he stood up. "It's getting late. I should get home. I'll be back around noon tomorrow to pick you up, if that's all right." "Noon is fine," she told him. "Do you want me to pack us a picnic lunch? We could find a good spot to stop and eat during our walk." "I'd like that," he said. She walked him to the door, and he leaned down and gave her a quick peck on the cheek. "I'll see you at noon." "Good night," she said, as she closed the door softly. She leaned back against it and let out a breath. She had never had a date like that. He had been absolutely polite and hadn't tried anything. She wasn't sure if she was glad that he respected her, or disappointed that he hadn't at least tried to kiss her. She could fall for Alex if given half a chance. Chapter 3. Rose packed a picnic lunch of sandwiches and some individual bags of chips along with some cookies she baked that morning. She included several bottles of water, and packed it all into a backpack that they could carry along on their walk. The knock on her door came at exactly noon, and she opened the door to find him standing there. She handed him the backpack with their lunch in it and grabbed her jacket. She would probably only need it for the first few minutes of their walk, but she could always tie it around her waist if she got too hot. After they were settled into his truck, he asked what she'd fixed for lunch. "Nothing exciting," she answered. "Just some turkey and pimento cheese sandwiches and some chips. Chocolate chip cookies for dessert." She was missing something. She knew she was. "Oh. And some bottles of water in case we get thirsty." "Did you make the cookies?" he asked. "Actually I did," she told him. "Don't ever expect it again, though. I only bake when I feel like it. I felt like it this morning." "I expect nothing from you," he said. "I just enjoy your company. If you hadn't wanted to fix a lunch, I'd have run through a fast food place for us." She grinned. "You're starting to get to know me already, aren't you? I'm nothing if not unpredictable." He laughed. "Well, you were there when you said you'd be there, so that was predictable. I can stand you up next time to prove my point, if you'd like," she offered with a smile. "That's okay. I'd prefer to not be stood up," he said. He held her hand as they walked through the park. The path they walked on was tree-lined and paved. They had both walked it multiple times over years of living in Arlington. As they walked, they talked about the things they saw along the way. Finally, they reached the end of the path overlooking the Trinity River. It was a nice day for March, and they'd run into a lot of other people along the way. It had been a wet winter, so there was actually a decent amount of water in the river. It would be dried up by the end of summer if they had a normal summer. "Do you want to eat here, or find a spot off in the woods on the way back?" he asked. The area they were in had some concrete benches that would be fine for eating, but there were some areas off in the woods that were similar, but more private, on the way back. "Let's find a spot in the woods if you don't mind," she responded. "I like the feeling of seclusion in the middle of the city." "Okay," he grabbed her hand again as they turned and headed back. A few minutes later, they found a trail off the main path and followed it to a concrete bench. "Is this good?" she asked. "Perfect," he told her. They sat down, and he handed her the backpack. She divided up the food between them, and they sat in silence while they ate and drank, enjoying the sounds of nature around them. When they were finished, they packed all of their trash into her backpack, and she started to stand. He caught her hand and pulled her back down onto the bench beside him and turned toward her. "Is it okay if I kiss you?" he asked. He'd never asked a girl that question before. He'd always assumed it was okay and just done it, but Rose was different. Rose nodded slowly. She had only been kissed a couple of times. Her philosophy on sex before marriage prevented most men from trying. She turned toward him on the bench. He put his hands on her shoulders and slowly drew her closer to him. He lowered his head to hers for a soft, gentle kiss. Their lips barely touched before he lifted his head. Her eyes were half closed. He looked down at her, waiting for any sign that she didn't like his kiss, then lowered his head again. His tongue traced along her lips, and she opened her mouth to him. Wrapping her arms around his neck, she met his tongue with hers. Rose had never felt this way from a kiss. The warmth spread through her stomach, causing tingling throughout her entire body. She ran her tongue along the inside of his upper lip and heard him groan. Alex lifted his head and lightly pushed her away from him. "You are going to be the death of me," he said. She sat quietly watching him and wondering why he'd pulled away. Her breathing was deeper than usual, and she could feel her heart pounding. Her lips were still moist from their kiss, and she touched her tongue to her lip to see if his taste was still there. Alex watched her tongue and felt his groin tighten. They needed to get back to where people could see them. He needed to stop touching her. He took her hand and led her back to the main path. Just kissing her made him feel so much more than he'd ever felt from sex with other women. She was dangerous. Rose wasn't sure what she'd done wrong, but she followed along with him. She didn't say anything as they walked. She knew that she didn't have much experience kissing, but could she really have been that bad at it? When they reached his truck, he opened the door for her and headed back toward her apartment. He drove in silence. Rose took a deep breath. "I'm sorry." Alex looked at her in surprise. "What are you sorry for? For making you mad? For being a bad kisser?" "I don't know." "For whatever freaked you out back there," she said in a low voice. Alex felt like kicking himself. "I'm the one who should apologize, Rose. When I kissed you, I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Kissing you is sexier than getting naked with most girls. I felt like I needed to get you somewhere public where I couldn't try and take advantage of the situation. I understand now why girls always had to have chaperones until recently." Her eyes widened. "I see. Can I just say that kissing you turned me on a whole lot too? I've only been kissed a couple of times, but you were definitely the only one who has made me want more than a quick kiss. That doesn't help. I love it that you're so blatantly honest about everything, but I could have done without that this time. This is only the second time I've been out with you, and you're already getting under my skin." He shook his head. He'd known he liked her that first night, but what he was feeling now was out of his realm of experience. "I understand," she said. It was no big deal. They had made no commitments to each other, right? Why did she feel like she was losing so much then? "It's been a fun weekend." "Thanks for that. I've enjoyed the weekend too. More than I can express," he told her. He needed some time alone to think right now. He wasn't going to be able to go through a long dating process with her. She turned him on too much. He needed to regroup. He pulled up in front of her apartment and opened her door for her. Instead of following her inside, he kissed her cheek. She smiled up at him. "Goodbye, Alex." "Lock the door after me," he said as he turned to go. Rose walked into her apartment and sank onto the couch, letting her tears fall. How could she have fallen for him in one weekend? How could she have believed that he might actually want a relationship? She knew better. She always had. Sensible virginal Rose didn't fall in love in less than 48 hours. She just didn't. She wondered how many times she'd have to tell herself that before she started to believe that she hadn't already fallen in love with him. Rose got up and worked out before work the following morning like she always did. She pushed herself harder than ever, trying to block Alex from her mind. At her desk that day, she felt out of it. She answered calls and did her job, but her mind and heart were not in it. She felt like she was working through a thick fog that she just didn't want to find her way out of. At lunch, her cube mate, Alicia, cornered her in the kitchen. "What's with you? You're acting weird." Rose looked up at her. "I'm sorry. I guess I'm just distracted." She wasn't sure she was ready to talk about Alex with anyone. Alicia was her closest friend, so if she could talk to anyone it would be her. Alicia looked at her with concern for a moment, and then her whole face lit up. You met a guy, didn't you? Rose laughed. You know me. As soon as I tell them I'm planning on staying a virgin till the wedding night, they take off running. Rose tried to make it sound like nothing had happened. Who was the guy who didn't? You actually went out with someone, didn't you? Come on, Rose, it's me you're talking to. Tell me everything. Alicia was like a dog with a bone. She wasn't giving up until she got to the meat of the matter. Rose sighed. I did meet someone, and I told him what I tell everyone else. We went out on Saturday night and went for a walk in the park and had a picnic yesterday. And I blew it when he kissed me, she thought. That sounds promising. A picnic in the park sounds right up your alley. What's his name? When are you seeing him again? Alicia was practically bouncing up and down with excitement, her short red curls were swaying with her movements, her brown eyes flashing. You have to tell me everything. His name is Alex. I'm not seeing him again, Rose said, looking down so that Alicia wouldn't see how hurt she actually was over that. Why not? What did you say to him? Alicia asked with a sigh. She knew that Rose tended to be so outspoken that people shied away from her. The ones who got to know her loved her for who she was, but strangers didn't tend to stick around long. Why do you assume I said something? Why do I have to be the villain? Rose felt defensive, even though she knew it was her fault. Somehow. You know you always say stupid stuff. Why else would a guy who was willing to put up with your old-fashioned weirdness take off? Rose shrugged. I didn't this time. I swear. We kissed in the park, and he said that I was getting under his skin, and he dropped me off at home. That was it. No way. You had to have said something. Alicia couldn't believe that he would take off just like that. Not if Rose hadn't gone all rosish and said something completely crazy. I really didn't. I mean, I said a bunch of things, but he seemed to like it all. For once, she'd found someone who'd liked her for who she was. At least she thought she had. You really liked him, didn't you? Alicia asked softly. Can you fall in love in a weekend? Rose asked, refusing to let the tears shining in her eyes fall. I can. I didn't think you could, but I do it all the time, Alicia told her. I said fall in love, not fall in lust. Oh, well, I don't know then, Alicia said with a wink. It's so hard to separate the two. Where did you meet him anyway? You didn't mention a date on Friday. I met him Friday night doing laundry. Rose waited for Alicia's disgusted reaction and wasn't disappointed. Are you still doing laundry on Friday nights? Alicia sighed heavily. What is wrong with you? A lot, I guess, Rose said, heading back to her desk. She wasn't in the mood to listen to Alicia complain about her laundry night. Alicia shook her head, trailing along behind her. Let me fix you up with someone. I'll give him the no-sex spiel, but you could just go out and have a good time and get Alan off the brain. That was always Alicia's fix. Find a new one. It's Alex. And no thanks. I let you do that once before and it was a disaster, remember? She had one time, and one time only, given in to Alicia's demands that she let her set her up. The guy had thought he was God's gift to women, and had been certain that he'd be able to convince Rose to give up her ideas of chastity. When it hadn't worked, he'd gotten ugly and she'd had to call a cab to get home. Alicia's ideas of good guys and her own were far apart. Well, would you consider having sex with this Alex guy to keep from losing him? Alicia asked. Alicia had no problems with having casual sex. She said that as long as she made sure to use protection, there was nothing wrong with it. I don't want a man that I have to change my values for. If he can't accept who I am and respect my values, then he's not worth having, Rose told her as she sat down and picked up her headset. But she was tempted. Alex was special, and she didn't want to let him go. Alicia shook her head at her as she got back to work. Rose felt that Alicia was so busy looking for Mr. Right that she lost too much of herself in the process. She'd even told Alicia that a time or two. Not that Alicia listened to what she called Rose's antiquated moral values.